in a sense, really, it's the marketing that creates the sales. Just going around to stores and taking numbers, you've got to really get the demand. It's the same as getting into America with our product. Once we had a 5-star shoe, it was in demand. So you've got to create that demand.
Mr. Joe Foster, thank you so much for this. I am very, very excited for this. I really appreciate it. In between all your travels, we're going to record a great podcast. So thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure. It really is. It's a pleasure. And we're in a nice place. You're in a nice place. So let's get on with that.
Let's make the most of it. So you've always spoke about building Reebok as the brand. You wanted to build Reebok. You didn't want to build Joe Foster. Why was that?
Well, to me, it's if you want to build a brand, really, it's a question of not dilution. And I didn't want to dilute the brand by saying, I'm Joe Foster, I'm Joe Foster. I do that now because now I'm selling a book, which is different. But in building the brand, really, it was all about Reebok. And of course, if you really want to build a brand, you've got to build a team. And that team have to feel that they have some ownership. They have to be in love with the brand, just you're in love with the brand. So really, it is a question of just not getting the wrong message over, just not saying, no, this is Joe Foster's brand. My grandfather, of course, had a brand, J.W. Foster. Unfortunately, that went. Whereas Reebok right now, Reebok is going from strength to strength, which is really great.
If you compare that to Tesla, so Elon Musk has attached that brand, Apple, which was Steve Jobs, which went on to being Tim Cook, do you think you could have grown a bigger brand if your name was out there?
Oh, I don't think so. It's I mean, it's difficult to say, isn't it? It's difficult to say if people like to get that association. There usually is an association between a person, but for me, with Reebok, we needed the big market. The big market was America. That was the big market. And so it was good to get into the big market and let Paul Fireman, let people relate to Paul Fireman, who really did a fantastic job in growing the brand in America once we got there. And it took us a long time to get there. Would it have been any better with Joe Foster? I really don't know. I mean, you think of Apple and you think of Steve Jobs. And unfortunately, he passed away far too soon. Where would he have taken it? I mean, okay, Tim Cook's there now, but really, this was Steve Jobs' brand. So,
of course.
But you look at the brand and you see Apple. And Apple, of course, is a tremendous brand. So is Tesla. But of course, we've got a well-known person at Tesla, of course. But he's quite a character. I don't think I'm quite such a character.
But it's interesting because if you look at Steve Jobs, he was design-led first. He was the designer and he is the visionary and had that thing about him. So it was you and your brother with Reebok. What was it that you were bringing to the table?
Well, funnily enough, slight backtrack to the family business. My grandfather started his business in 1895. When he died in 1933, his sons took it over. My father and my uncle. Now, they didn't get on at all. They fought. There's about 5 years difference in age, and they just fell out all the time. So that's the reason that Jeff and myself left the family business and set up Reebok. But in setting up Reebok, we'd both seen what our father and uncle were like. And when we got to the factory, it was a question. Jeff loved the factory. He really loved the factory. And he said, look, Joe, I'll look after the factory. I'll look after things here. You do the rest. And so I had that job. I had to do the rest. So I guess it was my job really to find the pulse, to give it a heartbeat, to do the marketing, whatever it takes. And so that was my job. So we really didn't clash. We didn't have a problem. He did look after the factory. And of course, the rest is what I had to look after, which was a lot of stuff. And I probably did a lot of things that probably weren't too good, but we never fell out. My brother and myself, we never had a bad word. So, in that sense, it was good. We each had a place to operate from.
Why do you think you didn't like the factory? I know you said that you hated manufacturing shoes. Do you think it was an interest or a skill that you
Well,
did that you
I
lacked?
guess really I had other interests more than, you make a shoe and the next shoe is the same thing. It's just another
Yeah.
shoe. Okay, I used to do the designing. So I would do quite a bit of drawing shoes, designing shoes, thinking of the names for the shoes and whatever, doing the advertising, making the pamphlets, whatever we were doing, brochure or whatever. I would do all that. I think I preferred to work on different things. And,
Mhm.
when you're doing marketing, when you're doing or building the brand, it's never the same thing day after day. It's never the same day. Whereas in a factory, you're making the shoes and I guess I would have gone to sleep making shoes.
Of course, it's a repetitive task. I think you have that creative brain. But where did your education around this come from? Because there's no internet, there's not much magazines telling you that you should write these particular words. So when your creative brain was going into the marketing arm from the very early stages, even the design, like where does your idea from design come from?
Well, with a brand, you really have to have that recognition. So you think of Adidas and you think of Three Stripes, you think of Nike and you think of the swoosh. Well,
Mhm.
we had to get a silhouette as well. So once you've got the silhouette, really, in my day of designing, once you got the silhouette, it was just little bits and pieces that you changed. You didn't change the silhouette, and you got the name. So designing was really a matter of saying, have they got new materials? And there are always new materials to look at. There's instead of having sponge rubber, we got EVA. EVA is a plastic. And EVA
Mhm.
is used today, but it's a nice sponge and it's a lot lighter. So really, designing is, for me, designing was more making sure that the product really performed.
Mm.
And in those early days, we were a performance company. We dealt with athletes. I mean, today, Reebok, even Nike and Adidas, they whilst they use performance to drive the company, they're fashion. They're fashion brands now. You know,
Streetwear.
it's all streetwear, it's all fashion. It's and there's a lot of people now who make shoes just for fashion.
Mhm.
You know,
Of
you
course,
see,
especially
yeah,
bigger companies.
yeah. Well, that's where your volume is. The
Of
volume
course.
now is street. So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, Reebok, when we started, and what did I do? Uh, Well, there's a lot of things you've got to do when you such a new materials. I can remember we made this special shoe for Ron Hill. I don't know if you remember Ron Hill. He was
Unfortunately, Joe, I'm too young for this. I'm too young for this.
yeah, he was our best ever marathon runner, really, Ron Hill.
Okay.
It was really good, and we made this shoe, and he actually broke the world 10 record in this shoe. But I remember going down to Pittards. Pittards, you won't even know they make probably the best leathers in the UK, and they make
Mhm.
glove leather, and it's beautiful. And I'm going through this swatch of leather, and come across this sort of burnt umber uh, sample, and they call the name of it was Snazzy Fox, and that and that became the name we used on this shoe. So you pick up these things, a Snazzy Fox, yes, and it's great. It's like a burnt orange, and and we made his shoes out of that Snazzy Fox, and wow, everybody loved the name.
You
So
started as performance shoes, as you said, but how could you test the performance back then? So what date is this?
well, we tested the performance on athletes. We were very close to the athletes. We
Mhm.
weren't just a remote factory making shoes. We were part of the athlete scene, and every
You were living and breathing it.
oh yeah, every Saturday, people, they'd have Saturday off. The athletes, and we'd have a workshop full of runners who just come and help, come and talk, come and buy a pair of shoes, whatever. So we got all our advice from these guys, and if we wanted something tested, just give a guy a pair of shoes and say, "I'll come back when give them a run." And man, that was the best sort of testing we could get. The
Mhm.
guy would come back and say, "Oh, this is a problem, or that's a problem," or or they're just wonderful shoes. And mainly I was wonderful shoes.
If you think about the lean startup like Eric Rice, his main thing is get out and speak to your customer. And so many entrepreneurs are afraid of their idea being like rejected by the public, whereas you literally lived and breathed it with the athletes, and that's why it worked.
Well, I mean, absolutely. For us, we were never remote from the wearer
Mhm.
of the shoes, from our athletes. uh, I can't imagine being remote. Anyway, I suppose at Foster's, when before we left and set up our own company, we didn't see many athletes there.
Mhm.
But Jeff was a runner. He he enjoyed running. He was also a cyclist. I was a badminton player, so we never made badminton shoes. That was a different type of manufacturer. But Jeff was a runner, and as such, that really got us into the athletic scene. And of course, you know, when we were looking at retail stores, the old sports shop, the sports shops used to be maybe two or three in a town, and they would sell everything from snooker cues and chalk for your cue to whatever, footballs,
Mhm.
everything. So really, we were quite specialized in athletics at that time, in running. So we did a lot of direct selling, and we would go to athletic meetings as well. So we turn up at an athletics meeting, you know, whatever it was, whether it was track and field, we could be on track and field, or if it was cross country, road races. So you turn up there and you talk to people. So really, we were dealing with athletes all the time. Um,
Mhm.
and I used to think about the company. Are we a shoemaker, or and part of the shoemaking sort of business, or are we part of the sports business? And
Mhm.
really, we were more part of the sports business than making shoes. But it was very interesting, and of course, you learn an awful lot when you talk to people, and you see the way they run. And some of these guys have a very unusual running style. So
Mhm.
you find out if something's going wrong with your shoe. Is it the shoe, or is it the athlete? And that's quite important to know that. We used to get some people saying, "Oh, my shoe's worn so badly on this at this point," and it's because their particular running style,
Yeah.
they would just land on a certain point on the shoe, and that would just be so abrasive. Also, we used to find people coming back if they lived in some country area, and the roads were gritted. They used um, granite chips for the road. It's surprised how much that would wear the shoes out, just running on
Mhm.
a road which had granite chips, not tarmac. And it's so you learn an awful lot of, well, probably irrelevant things, but once
But the diamond is in there. The
but
diamond is in there.
yeah.
100%. I'm laughing because I used to do a lot of track and field, a lot of sprinting, 100-meter. And
Hmm.
whenever I would run, the shoes would wear out at 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks. And you could
Right,
always tell if like my arches were fucked or something was like wrong or my heels are wrong. You could tell it in the shoe. And it
yeah,
was always so evident, And then I would go to physiotherapists and I had problems with my ankles and my Achilles and my calves and my hamstrings. And it all goes back to the foot placement, which I thought was
right,
very, very interesting. And like
yeah,
that was 100-meter sprinting. It was also like long this a bit longer as well, 200-meter too. I wanted to
okay,
ask you about your grandfather and the business. So
right.
when I compare this to your story to the previous business that you left, how different was that experience for you?
Well, I guess that so we grew up and started to work in the factory. I think I was 17 when I when I started to work in the factory. Um, and I only had 1 year because when I was 18, we went to do national service in those days. So I did national service in 2 years before coming back and working back in the factory. And that was just working in a factory. I think when the difference is that when you're working for yourself, you're working for a brand, not just making shoes. But working in the factory, father and uncle were supposed to run the business. Um, but really, they didn't do a good job of that. You read the book, I believe, so you probably
Mhm.
understand they didn't do a good job. My grandfather, though, I mean, he must have been quite a genius. I never knew him. He died 15 months before I was born, and I was born on his birthday, so that gave me some credibility in the family. And he must have been, I mean, he used to go around to athletics meetings. In fact, he was, I think he was chairman of the Bolton United Harriers. He actually ran the club, the Bolton Club, which was a very well-known club in its day. So he was very much involved. And I think my uncle was also sort of quite involved. My father never seemed to be bothered with that side of it at all. So I think that, I mean, when my grandfather, 1904, he knew something about influencing, because he obviously gave his shoes to athletes, winning athletes. And if you give your shoes to the right people, they're seen. So that's influencing other runners. You know, having world records in 1904 in his shoes, that's pretty good. And of course, then we have in the 20s, we got Chariots of Fire, and the athletes out little Harold Abrahams, Lloyd Burley, they all won gold medals in the 1920s, and they won them in my grandfather's shoes. So he knew how to influence. And that, if you think about it, you go back to that time to be able to get people to wear your shoes. And of course, he only needed to give his shoes in those days. Now you've got to pay an awful lot of money to get somebody who will be an influencer to wear your product. But yeah, so I think grandfather had a very good business. The problem is, in his day, athletics footwear was pure performance, just performance. Nothing went on the street. People wore street shoes for street. So his volumes were quite small, if you consider. I mean, even today, if we just look at track and field, the volumes are quite small. It really is people who go out training, running on roads. So it's road racing. That's where the volume comes from, of performance in athletics. Otherwise, you go to other sports. I mean, the big sport, of course, is football, and that's where the big volume is, as far as sports performance shoes are concerned. So
that's very interesting.
Yeah, but of course, so it's training. It's what people wear for training, and training doesn't require spikes in the bottom or studs in the bottom, and so you can go. You can see how it sort of transferred into streetwear, and I mean, now I think really, as far as apparel is concerned, I think the sports brands, and the big one, of course, is Nike. I mean, what are they in, about a $25 billion business? That's pretty big for we'll say apparel, which, you know, clothing and footwear. It's pretty big. So I think probably the biggest apparel brands now are the sports brands,
because they have so much diversification in their approach. They literally have this long tail products and services that they can offer. They can offer even wearables now, and they can offer different technology stack on top of the clothing, so they can upsell and cross sell and give you all different types of discounts, you know. But you had that vision, though. I think you, even in your own way, like when you were building out the shoes and going further and going further. So when you were even moving into your own factory and you're building that out, and famously you had holes in it and the factory had lots of issues, how did you know you were going to build? Like, how did you go about the building process?
Well, I think you said, how did you know? We didn't know. we didn't know.
Stumbled, fumbled, fell.
Yeah. I think what you do know is that one day has got to be better than the day before. You've got to strive to improve. You've got to either sell more product, or you've got to improve your product. So you're never still. It's never sort of, well, we made 100 pairs yesterday, we'll make 100 pairs tomorrow. No, we've got to make 110. We've got to sell 110. We've got to convince people that we've got the best product. So really, it's you know, do you have a vision, or does that is it something that grows with you? And I think to an extent it's something that grows with you, because you see in a different door opens a different opportunity. America came along, and so that was the big one. I needed America because for me that was the volume. And it's no use having a big factory if there's nobody to sell the product to. And I mean, and then again, our factory was never really that big. It was okay, but I knew that once we, if we were to grow as a company, we needed to have access to production rather than spend our time building factories, which is what we did. I mean, I had quite a good friend in Barter. You won't even know Barter. Volume-wise, they're the biggest shoe company in the world.
Okay.
All right, and you don't know them. Why don't you know them? Well, the reason you don't know them is because they are the biggest makers of shoes in the world, because that's what they do. But
They're white label.
Well, they have their own label. They used to have a shop on every high street in the UK.
Okay.
But of course, street shoes have been sort of changing, developing, probably coming more towards the footwear that we were making. And so they're not in the UK anymore, but they're in places like Latin America, India. So this is why they've got the volume. They still wear regular shoes. But their side of, we'll say, footwear, that was shrinking. That was difficult to expand. So really, I think it's a question of saying, where's the vision? Where are things moving? And we were very lucky. We were in a business, we'll call it the sports business. We were in a business that was expanding. From setting off our company in 1958, right up until COVID, the Reebok. Well, I was out of the company before COVID, so whilst I was in the company, we never had a recession, and there were a few recessions that we went through in the UK. But being in the trade we were in, if people are out of work or whatever, if businesses are having a hard time, people still want to play sports. They still want to go and do something. They don't want to sit at home. So our business just continued. We never had a recession at all. It kept growing. So we were lucky to be in that type of business.
And how much revenue were you doing, if you can walk through so many years?
Yeah, I forget. I mean, we were all in the thousands and the hundreds of thousands in those early days.
Yeah.
I don't think we even touched $1 million until I just about got to America. And then
What type of margin would you have?
What sort of
margin, a profit margin would you have generally?
Profit margin.
Profit margin. What would be? I think we. I mean, that's a funny one, and a few stories on that one. But we probably try to aim for something like 20%. If we could get 20%, and if we were retailing, of course, we would get 70%. So it depends where we were on that. I mean, we did sell to stores, and the store would sort of put their markup onto it, so they would probably make something like 30 to 50% of that's what they would make. So, and we never undersold those stores. We didn't sell them cheap. We kept the prices the same, so we would make quite a big profit if we went to selling at race events and things like that. We could make a good profit. It's only when you get to a certain size that you stop doing that, because you then have distribution, proper distribution, and when we got to distribution, that's when, of course, you get big. Our factory then was no good to us, because making shoes in the UK is too expensive. Exactly. So in order to have enough margin there to spend on your marketing and advertising, this is when production went to the Far East. So in the Far East, they could make a good product, better, I think, than what we could make in the UK. I don't know why, but that we could really get good stuff for about a third of the price. So when you're doing that, all your calculations change. And I would say it wasn't long after getting into America that really we became just a marketing company. We were no longer manufacturing as such. Designing, yes, and you had to watch the qualities. You got a lot of work to do in that. But actual manufacturing, we stopped manufacturing shortly after I got us into America, because then, in order to to export shoes from the UK to America would have been expensive, and so getting them from Korea, I suppose the journey is just about the same, but of course the price of the product was about a third of the price. So you can see where the whole sort of leverage of the company just changed. And so what we had in the UK, we had a company that was working with athletes, and the athletes were with us, and that was a close community, and that was great. It was nice business, but we needed to change the whole strategy of the business once we started to really export, and once we started in America. So that changed Reebok, say, from being a sort of a nice family, close to the athletes and working with athletes, into being now a sports company. We were then a big company, and at that point, we had proper distribution, as it were, because in America, the retail side started to grow as well. And once you got big retailers, and I think it was Foot Locker and people like that, once you got that, they were multiple shop owners. So the whole strategy of the business changed. And so, yes, you're designing, you're marketing, but at that point, I think you become really more of a marketing company than a manufacturing company. So, but we had to do what we did in the UK in order to create that, to get to know what you're doing, to get the right product.
Learn your craft.
Yeah. To know that, to have that product and take it to America, you knew what product to take to America. It wasn't a question of going to America and saying, I wonder what these guys want. No, we knew what to take to America, and then of course get the strategy of making the products in the Far East. That allowed so much more money to be available for marketing, and that lets you grow.
And how did you go about finding out the distributor in the Far East? Because they'll have different ways to get materials, labor. How did you validate where you wanted to source from?
Well, funnily enough, during the I would say probably the 50s and 60s, the shoe industry in the UK was dying, and it was dying because there were people sourcing from the Far East. Before we went to the Far East, sourcing had started from Korea, I think it started in Japan, then Taiwan, and then it went over to Korea. By the time we were ready, it was in Korea. So these guys were very experienced at making shoes, and because they were making street shoes at the right price, they were making volumes. So they knew how to do volumes, and they knew how to make the product. Switching them to the sports product, a little bit of they had to learn a little bit, but a shoe is not difficult to make. This is why we they used to call them counterfeits. We used to get a lot of counterfeits, but they weren't really counterfeits. They were really genuine shoes. They just went through a different door. They have a different business perspective than we have. So shoes are not difficult to make. You can easily copy them. There's no great technology with it. So I guess for these guys, they could switch to making sports shoes from regular street shoes quite easily. The machinery was the same. So I don't think that was a problem. And they could do the volumes. And again, I remember my first trip to South Korea. And, you know what, the upper of the shoe, that's the top of the shoe, the upper. You put the upper on a last, right? So you make it, the last gives it its shape. Well, the upper itself, you've got holes for laces,
Mhm.
all right? And if you can imagine the uppers all sewn together, there's no holes for the laces. And we would have a machine, which you put it on the machine and it just punches holes. What they had a big block of wood. They put the upper down on the block of wood, and one guy, he would have a tool in his hand, and the tool had these punches in it. And he would put that on, and somebody would hit it with a hammer. And that's the method they were using to punch the holes for the laces. So it took 3 people. Whereas in the UK, we had a machine and just put it on the machine and your holes would be put in. So they could afford to have 3 people doing that. And still the price of the shoes, when you had all the other jobs that needed done, still the price of the shoe was only a third of what we could produce them for. So labor was no problem. And I mean, we know these days they talk about sweatshops and goodness knows what. And yes, but you know, the other side of that was they had a job. They were being paid
100%.
something.
They were in their industrial revolution as well. They were just coming through the new phase of development of their economy.
That's right. They were just learning about a manufacturing economy, and of course, I suppose really just to eat and do something, be able to afford something like that was great for them. And that's going back to the 70s, going back a long time. But, and now I think they're much more mechanized now. In fact, I think they are well mechanized, and they're probably more advanced than even we were at our best. But I mean, we were there at that time, at that process, and I say even from the 50s and 60s, the shoe industry in the UK had been dying off because there was always somebody ready to go to the Far East and develop the product over there. So you know, by the time we were ready to go out there, the shoe industry in the Far East was pretty well organized and going. So we didn't
network.
Much, yeah. We didn't have to teach them very much.
That's interesting. And just going back to even that process of getting into America. So for you, it was 11 years, if I'm correct in saying that, in total.
It was 11 years, yes.
Right. So in 11 years, most founders or entrepreneurs will give up during that process. They would give up at year 1. Some of them would give up at day 1. How did you go through 11 years of trying to persist to get through into one market?
Well, I guess there are a number of reasons why you do these things, and a number of reasons why it takes 11 years. You must remember, you're in Singapore, I'm in Tenerife, and we're having a conversation as though we sat across the table. And this is good, but if you go back to the 60s, we did have telephones, but we didn't have satellites. So the telephones depended upon how many wires were going across the Atlantic, or how the communication was going, landlines. So even to get a conversation with somebody in America was almost impossible. You had to get to whoever was operating the telephone operators and say, I'm going to put a call through, and you could give them a number of someone in America, and they say, right, we'll get back to you. and you could be waiting. You could be waiting an hour, maybe more. And then, the other thing about that was if the guy you were trying to call wasn't even there, you'd made a call to America, you'd waited an hour to get there, and then
how inefficient is this?
I mean, so can you imagine that go back there and it takes 11 years to get to America? Well, yeah, because we didn't have satellites. The only way I could get to America was to take a plane, was to get on an airplane and fly and go to the big show, the NSGA show, the National Sporting Goods of America in Chicago. I used to go there every year. And even writing letters, a letter would take days to get to wherever you wanted. And then, if you wanted an answer, you would have to wait for days for that to come back. And sometimes you wondered if your letter had arrived, so you'd write another letter. So letters were crossing. Yeah,
It's like texting twice.
yeah. So when we talk about why did it take time, I guess it was at that time, that age, when really international business was probably okay once you'd set it up. But setting it up, that's where the trick was, getting to set it up and get it to move. So I would go across only once a year for those 11 years. I don't only be able to go across to the sporting goods show, the NSDA. So for 4 days, and that's the length of the show, I have 4 days every year to make the contact, to try and get somebody. So if you multiply that by 11, it's only like 50 days.
Oh my God. So you have 50 chances to shake the right
Yeah.
hands.
So even though it's 11 years, you've not that many chances to do things.
But could you not have gone to New York or LA and done other events or whatever?
Well, you could go to New York and LA. Who do you go to meet, though? Who are you
I don't
meeting?
know. You
Yeah.
you walk into some shoe shop or or you get the names of distributors or some shit like that.
Yeah, but I think really the best contact we had were the consulates, or the embassy. You got British embassies all over, and they'd usually have a trade person there who would be able to point you in directions. But it's all a question of saying, well, if you do decide to take a trip, we'll say to LA, even to New York, it's spending that time, it's having the money to do that, because it wasn't a cheap way of going about
Ryanair.
finding business. Yeah, we didn't have Ryanair in those days. We only had British Airways. So, I mean, today it's difficult to relate to what we had to, or what we didn't have in those days. I mean, right now it's incredible. We went out to Australia, and as I said before, we took a flight to Dubai, had a couple of days in Dubai, and we're members of, or we're involved with a lot of connections now. We connect with a lot of people, and so in Dubai we meet a lot of people. We're introduced to some sheikh, whatever, and in 24 hours we have golden visas. So now we have a visa for Dubai. It's the connectivity now and the networking now is just incredible.
What advice would you have for someone trying to build a network, young people?
Well, now they've got the tools now. We didn't. The tools were not invented. Now they have the tools, and now you have Google, and you have Google. So all you need to do is Google, and we get a lot of people talking to us in all sorts of language, and you need to, what was all that? And so we just Google it, and you find out what this means and what that means, and people just write now in acronyms, and it's like ROI, the ROI on this, and this, ROI, what's that? Oh, return on investment, right? Yeah. So, but now we have the tools, you can do it.
Of course.
Life is so much different now, right? Would you have gone off to Singapore in the 50s, 1950s? No connection, no connectivity, nothing. Who would you connect with? Because
It's a very different time.
Yeah, so it's a different time now. Now the world is just one place. People say, "Where do you live?" And we say, 35,000 feet, mostly, because we did live in France. We sold up, and particularly when the book got out just after COVID, a lot of people sort of wanted to see us after COVID. And the book was doing okay, and so we sold up our property in France. We're living in France, and we've never bought property since. We don't know where we'd live because
Best way to be.
We have a computer.
That's all you need.
Yeah, we have computers and smartphones, And now we can talk to anybody anywhere. And of course, we do travel because it's good to go and meet people. But we travel for a different purpose now. We travel to meet these people. We travel because down in Australia, Reebok now is with a new company, ABG, Authentic Brands Group, own Reebok now, and so they're setting up new distribution. In fact, I was reading now you find Reebok in 371,000 outlets.
Oh
That's
my
pretty
God.
good.
Yeah. You've done a good job over the years.
Well, that's it. Now they're all over the place, and Reebok will grow very big. I think now that ABG have got them. And so we were down because it's good to tell some of these new people this is how we started. You know, we started in Bolton. My grandfather did this, and so they all like to hear the story. And so that's what we do. We travel a lot and we tell the story, and it's great. Well, even Julie's now part of Global Women. She's part of that now, a big organisation. Now she's doing speaking as well. So both of us are getting involved. So
You've come a long way with that.
Yeah, when we talk about trying to compare where we were and where things are now, there is no comparison. It's just the tools are so different, and it's just fabulous that we can do what we're doing now with computers, and it's so clear. I mean, I remember early telephone conversations; you could hardly tell what people were saying. The lines were that bad, and there was a lot of noise. So what we have now is incredible. In fact, only I think it was yesterday, the guys we met in Australia. He was well, it was on the computer, but it was only audio, but it was clear as a bell, and he was just walking down to catch a train, and he was telling us about I'm going seeing Steve now, and we'd had some good times down there with Steve. And,
you've seen the full spectrum of
it. Yeah, I mean it is just so simple now, so easy. And they're down in Australia, we're in Tenerife, and the other side of the world, and it's clear, absolutely crystal clear, no problem. Just we have no problem.
When you were trying to get your place in the States, though, you always had trouble with the reviews that came out every year. That was your main thing, was to get your shoes listed on the reviews. Talk me through that process. How did that work?
Well, we're going back now to the to the 70s, and that was the time when running became big in America. A lot of people started going out running, and with it came this magazine, Runner's World. You think of America, and you think how many people? Well, there's nearly 400 million now. In my day, I think it was 350 million. And by the late 70s, we'll say 10% were running, had a pair of running shoes going out running. So you got 35 million going out running. And they were buying this magazine. So this magazine was doing very well, Runner's World, doing very well. It would tell you where all the races were. It would tell you who won the races. In fact, you could probably read your name because it'd give the lists of people who were in a race. And the guy, Bob Anderson, he was the editor, and he decided that he'd tell everybody which was the best running shoe. and on that first one, it was probably about 1975, and of course it was Nike. Well, if you can imagine, there's 35 million Americans running out there training, and they pick up this magazine and they read that this is the number one shoe, Nike. Well, at least 10% wanted that shoe immediately. So there's at least 3.5 million people want to buy that shoe. And Phil Knight, he's bringing his shoes in from Japan in those days. And could he get them? No. Factories just can't suddenly go from 0 to 3.5 million. Can't do it. So couldn't get the product. A year later, Bob Anderson, in his wisdom, decides, we'll have another shoe. We won't leave that one as number one. And he picked another one. I don't know New Balance, Etonic, Brooks. I don't know who it was. It certainly wasn't Reebok. But he picked it on. Same thing happened. They were being made in the Far East again. So the retail trade were really going wild because they couldn't get the shoes. Everybody wanted to buy a pair. So on the third time, instead of saying this was the number one shoe, he did ratings, star ratings. So 5 stars would be the best, but you could have 4 or 5 shoes at 5 stars, and then the other 4-star, 3-star too. So that's when we knew we could make a 5-star shoe. We would never get the number one shoe because we weren't in America. We weren't the biggest advertisers in Runner's World, but when it came to star ratings, we knew we could get a 5-star shoe. So that again was a good piece of luck for us that Bob Anderson changed to the star ratings, and that was in 1979. We got 3 5-star ratings. The first one was for Aztec. That was the runner trainer. That was the volume shoe. Then we had a racing shoe, Midas. That got 5 stars. Being a racing shoe, of course, you wouldn't get the same volume. And then we had a track spike. That also got 5 stars, Inca. So that was the difference. I had been pushing to try and get my product in, and I had 6 distributors in that time. In those 11 years, I had 6 different guys trying to get the product into America.
Were they on standby as you were building? Like some of them?
On standby?
Yeah, as in like if you didn't have the demand coming in and you had this distribution network, like how did that work from meeting demand and supply?
Well, I mean, I had 6 different guys over a period, one at a time, not all together. And we would get a bit of product over there, but we didn't get the demand. Okay? For whatever reason, at that point, we couldn't get the product in. Number of reasons being, we're a small factory in the UK. The Americans didn't like to import. That's the retailers. The retailers didn't like to import. Because, I mean, I do remember my first trip to America. That'd be 1968. And I went over there with a friend. And the retailers loved the product. Oh, great product. Where do I get this from? And I was saying, we get England. And I said, is that New England? No, not New England. Across the water, London. Oh, London, yeah. Well, when you get some stock over here, we'd love to give it a try. But it meant getting the product in. And we just didn't. I said 6 people tried. But when we got 3 5-star shoes, and it was in 1978 where I met this guy in America, Paul Fireman. If you read the book, Paul Fireman is a big part of that book because he did a hell of a job. And Paul Fireman, by that time, running was really getting big, and a lot of people wanted to get running shoes. I could have probably got in with Kmart because Kmart they're a big national distributor. Big stores all over the place. I could have probably got him with that, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted somebody who would value the brand, not just take a shoe. All they would do, they'd put them in the stores. They'd give them probably, we'll say, 10 square foot of exposure, and if that 10 square foot of exposure didn't sell enough product, that would be my first and last order. They wouldn't. They'd go somewhere else. So I wanted somebody like Paul Fireman, and Paul Fireman was hungry. Yeah, he was running an outdoor camping wholesaler business, and he'd been doing it for 10 years, and they were going nowhere. So he had thought, well, why don't I get into the running shoe business? So I can get into that. Well, that'd be okay. And I remember meeting, and I said to Paul, well, yes, that's good, and we were talking about 5-star shoes, and he said, if you get a 5-star shoe, I'll be your distributor. He wasn't really willing to go without a 5-star shoe. And of course, that is the difference. We didn't have a 5-star shoe in those early days because there was no such was no such thing. It wasn't even out, wasn't even an option before that. But now a 5-star shoe is an option. If you get a 5-star shoe, yes, we'll go for it. And that was the difference. When we got a 5-star shoe, people would read the magazine, see that we're a 5-star shoe, they'd go looking for Reebok. Once people were looking for Reebok, there was a demand. And
Wild.
that's how we got into America. That change, creating that demand.
How did you match it with supply?
Well, again, I knew very well if we got into America, we'd be in trouble manufacturing wise.
You'd be like Nike all over again.
Yeah, we could never have supplied the market. So I mentioned Barter. Barter did have a big factory in the UK, and I had a friend there, and he said, "Joe, if you get a distribution in America and you want some help, we'll help you." And they did. They made 20,000 pairs, and that was the first order, 20,000 pairs. I'd only had one order, 25,000 pairs. I'd only had one order bigger, and that came from Norway, of all places. We made training shoes for the Norwegian army. Yeah, that was an order that, but these things happen on occasions. Anyway, this was a big order, and yes, so Barter made shoes for us.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, Barter, as I've told you before, they made just regular bog standard street shoes, and getting them to make a running shoe, even though they had just started their own sports division. And my friend had gone down there to get them started, but they were concentrating on football, and they did get them wrong, and it was good and bad. But I mean, they were such a big factory. They had their own rubber factory, so they made their own rubber. And although we were using EVA is a plastic as against a rubber. And unfortunately, they made that as well, but they got the curing time wrong. Not on everything, but on about 10% of the sheets they made, the curing time, instead of it being a sponge, it just collapsed. It stayed collapsed. So they got some product wrong, and you could say it might have killed our business, but Paul Fireman didn't pay for the shoes because they got it wrong. So it allowed him to develop his business whilst we got going with the people in Korea, because we were working with Korea at the same time as with Barter. But it takes a lot longer to get things going from the Far East than it did to get some things going 200 miles away down the road from our factory to where Barter had their factory. That was much easier to get working. However, we did have people from Korea working on the product, and we did start to get our product from Korea, which meant that we could do the volume. But that was very handy. That worked very well. But it's like I knew that if we did get into America, we would need help. So we'd already laid some. I've done some groundwork on that, so we're okay, which is fine.
But when you did get to America, and you said you moved into more of a marketing department or more focus on marketing, I heard you say on Bradley TV that marketing is more important than sales. How is that?
Well, marketing is more important than sales. In a sense, really, it's the marketing that creates the sales. Just going around to stores and taking numbers, you've got to really get the demand. It's the same as getting into America with our product. Once we had a 5-star shoe, it was in demand. So you've got to create that demand. And the marketing people, these are the guys who think up and get these ideas. Certainly, if we take aerobics as an example, we went in there as a running company, and we were doing nicely. We were a 9 million business then, which sounded pretty healthy to us at that point. $9 million, not bad. But it was our guy in Los Angeles who saw the opportunity for aerobics. No one else, even in America, knew what was going on. Aerobics was something very new. It had been going a long while, but it just started to sort of grow. And so our guy, Arnold Martinez, who was great at marketing, and his wife was going to these aerobics classes. So he went down and he had a look at what was going on. He saw the instructor in a pair of sneakers. I think they were New Balance. And half the class in sneakers, the other half, no shoes at all. That's when he got the idea. Why don't we make a shoe just for aerobics, just for these women? Now, his idea was to make it out of glove leather, make it on a woman's last, and only in women's sizes.
Mm.
Now, that's marketing. And, okay, I didn't know at the time that this was going on because it was only a small thing and it just happened in America. But they did make it out of glove leather. Now, glove leather, you don't make shoes out of glove leather. But on saying that, the story about the snazzy fox was glove leather. But we turned it inside out. So we used the flesh side, the suede side out so that we could put the adhesive to get the sole to stick. The adhesive would go into that the suede side easy. They were using it leather side out. And in order to get the sole to stick to the upper, you have to take off the finish of the leather. You've got to rough it a bit so that now if you think glove leather is 1 millimeter thick, 1 millimeter, and then you start to work on it, you start to take the top off so that you can get the adhesive to go into the leather. So take the finish off, you take the flesh off, or you've got less than 1 millimeter of leather there. And where it joins, where the upper joins the sole, it becomes a very weak point. And just like bending something until it snaps, a little bit of wear and this thing. And so those shoes, the first shoes that they got there, they were falling apart. We were very lucky because we were in America and we were in Los Angeles. And the girls who bought the shoes, they didn't worry. So buy another pair. They were so comfortable. Great, comfortable. Okay, so I get to know about this. Now, what's going on? Why are you making shoes out of glove leather? Oh, well, we must feel like gloves. Yeah, but you don't make shoes out of them. Oh, okay. So what did they do? Well, what they did do, they decided to line that glove leather with nylon. So they stuck nylon to the back of it. So it was got the strength now. Nylon, great. But you don't stick nylon to the back of leather because leather is supposed to breathe. That's why you wear leather shoes. It breathes. It allows your foot to keep cool. It won't do that if you put nylon on. Oh, so what did they do? They punched holes in the front. A nice pattern on the van. They just punched a nice hole, a lot of holes, so it would breathe. And this is what marketing does. They don't know how to make shoes. And but don't the minute you learn how to make shoes, you start to make shoes. You don't sell shoes, and there's a difference. They had a product they wanted to sell, so they made it work. They made it work through marketing. A shoemaker wouldn't have done that. A shoemaker would make a shoe, and so this is where the marketing is different. They produce a different product. I mean, eventually we got around by getting the tanneries to make a thicker leather, more like garment leather. So it was still soft, but it had the right thickness. But it's marketing is so important, and I mean, another example of marketing. Have you heard of the pump? Reebok,
Nope.
Reebok pump?
Oh, pump shoes, yeah.
Pump shoe, yeah. Well, okay. The idea of you put a shoe on and you lace it up to make it fit. Well, the idea of the pump was, of course, that All feet are different shapes. If we put a bladder inside, you put your shoe on, and then you pump it up, it'll fit better. And that again is marketing, because really, if fit was such an important thing, everybody would have to pump shoes up. But you know, I say 999,000 shoes sort of don't have a lace compared to one with a pump. They'll just have a lace. So a lace works very well, and that system, it's okay. So the pump is more of a marketing job, but I mean, it was fabulous, because you got this little sort of half a basketball, because it started with a basketball on the tongue. You've got this little thing you could just press, and then you get a guy called D Brown, and he's on the halfway line, and they have this competition for dunking from the halfway line, and he's dunking the shoes, dunking the ball from the halfway, and then bends down and pumps his shoes up, and then turns his back and throws the ball again and dunks the ball. I mean, this is like it's incredible how everybody remembers that. I go to America, and the first thing that the guys are now probably in the mid 50s, maybe late 40s, say, "Oh, I remember I had a pair of pump. I was only a kid, and yeah, I was asking my parents, asking my dad, I want a pair of those pumps. Those were too expensive, because they're almost $200 a pair. You can't have those. Oh, I had to save up. I'd saved up for 6 months before I'd get a pair of those pumps." So they bought a pair of pumps, but because of that, once they saw what was happening, and then the friends,
They wanted it.
Everybody wanted a pair of pumps. Yeah. So so this
And
is what marketing is.
how do you go about your marketing? So a lot of people will like focus on the outcomes, focus on the benefits versus the features. How did you position it?
Well, I think if you look at my grandfather, and his marketing was to give some shoes to the best runners. They would run,
Yeah.
and they would win.
So you were doing influencer marketing before that was even a thing, and that
Right.
seems to be a big catalyst to you in that, because of course you had the aerobics, then you had the athletes, but you had that idea. Like if you think about it now, the virality that's in that, and I know you partner with like Cardi B and stuff at the moment, but that's incredibly powerful for you to think like that back then.
Well, you've got to think the company was growing and big, and you've got a lot of people.
Yeah.
And when you have a lot of people, there's a lot of people come up with ideas. And the best thing is to run with the idea. And they have lots of ideas. They had Hexalite, and they're all different transfer systems of. If they don't catch on, you forget it. It's what works. It's what catches on. And the pump was something. I think now you call it VizTech. Visible technology, VizTech, and VizTech is great because people like to play with VizTech. They pick it up. Like Nike has these the air bubble in the back sort of thing. They can see it. So when you talk about marketing, it is quite a matter really of getting onto something that really makes a difference with your company. And as far as we were concerned, you still look at Nike, and you still look at Nike Air. In fact, they have a film out now called Air, I believe, yes. And
your movie's coming next, Joe.
Well, we're working on that, yeah. we're working. You'd be surprised how many people keep on suggesting that we should do that, and yeah, it may happen. It may happen.
You'll get there. You will get there one day.
So, when we're talking about influencing people, you influence them in different ways. It's either the part of the product, or you use, we'll say with football, you use, you pay the best players to wear your product, to promote your product. That's how you influence. So in sport, performance is the best way to influence other people. Reebok they moved from performance to music. So it's 50 Cent, and they got Rihanna. They sponsored a few of these people. So it's really sponsoring people who are in the sort of in the public eye at that time, and you fight with other people to get that promotion. In fact, there's a company now, it's a film company that they're working on trying to get on the Nike versus Reebok at the time when Reebok became number one. At that time, and there were a lot of marketing things that went on. Reebok was sponsoring the American Olympic team. They have different. There were different gear for different things. So there were certain gear during their event, but when they go up to collect the medals, you can sponsor the tracksuits. And Reebok sponsored the American tracksuits for when they were picking up the medals, and the Americans had won the basketball, which of course everybody expected them. So the basketball team, but they were all sponsored by Nike. But of course they had to wear the special uniform, which was given to them for the presentation ceremony. They had to wear that. That was all part of the deals. And of course these Nike guys didn't like the idea. So one, he draped the American flag over, covering the Reebok sign up, and it created more awareness than if you just stood there.
Because it's like all publicity is good publicity to some extent, you know.
Yeah. So I mean, and there is that period of time when Nike and Reebok were head to head. And so many funny things went on. And as I say, somebody's going to make a film about that one. It was also, you've heard of Shaquille O'Neal, Shaq O'Neal, basketball player, 7 foot and 1 inch tall, size 22. That's his size, American size, but size 21 in the UK, apparently. And he went to Reebok, and he went to Reebok because he couldn't buy a pair of size 20. They only went size 20. Nike only went size 20. And so when he put size 20s on, of course, his foot was crushed up, whereas Reebok made him a pair of size 22. So he went to Reebok. But his coach said, come on, it's all right going to Reebok. You know, Reebok made him an offer, of course. I said, but we should go and see what Nike, because Nike wanted to see him as well. Nike would like to have him wear their shoes. But he turned up at Nike wearing a Reebok top. they were absolutely wild. he Reebok. He went to the Nike headquarters wearing Reebok. Oh. So, you can imagine that's now going to be a film, and
oh my God,
they're going to make a big thing out of it. So, and that's funny, but yeah, this goes to show how much marketing really is. You know, that's the game. Marketing is a game. The product, get the product right, get certain things right, but it's how you go about sort of getting this public vision, how the public view you, and
the perception.
Oh yes, the perception it's so important, and but everything's changing now. You know, we look at retail. I know when Reebok were being sold, Adidas, who had Reebok at the time, was selling Reebok, and there were about 4 or 5 people looking at it, and 1 or 2, certainly one in particular, wanted to have a chat with me. So we had a chat about, what can we do with Reebok, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's so happened that ABG paid a lot more money than these guys were willing to pay for it. And they paid an awful lot of money for the brand. And, it was bought by Adidas for $3.6 billion. And they just didn't look after the Reebok at all. And
why is that, do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, they didn't buy it to look after it. I think they bought it because of the assets, and they did move some of those assets they had agreement with the NBA, I think, and the NFL for the apparel. So I think they bought it for that. But then they tried to put Reebok as a fitness company and Adidas as a performance company. So they took Reebok out of team sports. They took Reebok out of all sports, really, even tennis. So, but the problem is that Reebok and Adidas were very much on the same level. You know, they were in the same playing field. And so they let Reebok almost die. And when they decided to sell Reebok, the revenue had gone down from 3.6 billion. That was with the revenue. They bought it for the revenue price. It had gone down to 1 billion. So everybody thought it's worthwhile. We'll pay $1 billion for it. Whereas ABG actually paid 2.5 billion.
Why?
They were in the bidding, and they just outbid everybody at 2.5 billion. Nobody thought it would be sold for that. So, but they paid an awful lot of money for it. But now, as I say, they got over 370,000 outlets now with ABG. And so, yeah, it's going to grow.
It's only the beginning.
Yeah. Oh,
But,
it's only the beginning. Yes, it's amazing now. But everything has changed so much now. We go to Dubai and you go in the malls. Wherever we go now, we go in the malls. It's good to walk in the malls. So you can get your mileage in and just walking through the malls. Also, it's so hot in Dubai. And now town centres, you look at town centres and they're dying. Why are they dying? Because nobody wants to be out in the rain. They don't want to be out in the cold, or they don't want to be out when it's too hot. And it's sport. It's entertainment. The malls now are entertainment. You go in the malls and there's everything there. And you can enjoy yourself and go and have a meal and go to the cinema in the mall, go and buy some stuff, or even just try it on and you can go home and buy it off the internet. But malls are here now, and this has all changed. So instead of being these small retailers we used to know, now they're larger retailers in large malls, and it's more of a sport. It's entertainment. So from where I was selling to a small sports store who would sell football boots, and he'd sell footballs, and he'd sell snooker bits and pieces. Now there's just these footwear stores, big ones. JD Sports is big, and Foot Locker and all these. They're just multiples. So what ABG, Authentic Brand Group, they've now just licensed these big retailers with the Reebok brand. So they give them a license, and they buy direct from the factories. Reebok don't handle shoes anymore. It's
straight.
But this is what's happened with so many different trades. They don't handle it. So all Reebok is now is a marketing company.
That is amazing.
Pushes the name out. So all these things have changed. And, I think starting off in business today, well, you've got to know how to handle this, computers. This is what it's all about now. It's all about information technology. This technology, if you can do something here, because, yes, there are new products coming out all the time. But, let me see now. Yeah, I guess Tesla is a product. And you can see it. And that needed a hell of a lot of organized and really to set up plants like that. Musk, whether he had a lot of money to start off with or what, I don't know, but you do need a lot of money, whereas you don't need an awful lot of money to do something smart with computers.
100%. You can run an agency off $0. Literally, like the agency that I have is literally run off $0. I just increase slight things over time. But when I ask you about profit margin, like a lot of things online are 80-90%. Like some people are doing 95% margins online, and that's the difference. But of course, the volume is less. It's boutique. It's bespoke. It's very personalized. It might not be the same volume, but there's some people who meet demand and supply and are doing 50,000 courses and at 100% margin. So there is that balance too, you know. But before we
Right.
finish up, the last thing I'll ask you is, what's the plan for the future?
Plan for the future. Well, as of this moment, what we are doing, we are traveling a lot, and we're traveling a lot by invitation. The invitation is that a lot of people have read the book, Shoemaker, and they like to ask questions. And a lot of the MBA students or the executive MBA students, we've done a few universities now, and well, you know what life is like now. It's the first question is okay, John, what was your exit plan? Exit plan? We didn't have an exit plan. Well, that wasn't part of our thinking at all. We didn't do that. And we had to work on growing our business. Now it's scaling your business. Oh, right. And we were a running company, and we changed direction and became a women's aerobics company because we became women's. Now you don't change direction now.
Pivot.
That's it. A pivot.
That's it. It's all the fancy words from people that do not have businesses.
Yeah, it is. Such different words, and so this whole thing has changed now. And so business has changed so much, and the way you go about business. And some in business, they want to scale it and then sell it. That's the idea. Think of the idea, work on it, scale it, exit.
I know some people that want to do all the fun stuff, but none of the hard stuff. They're not willing to go the extra mile to actually build a business. Whereas I think me and you are in a similar bracket whereby we want to grow something, and then what happens. That's the first and foremost. Good clients, good customers. That's it.
So that's what's happening these days. I'm going around talking to these people, and they ask some really good questions, and so it's good fun. And of course, having written Shoemaker, now we're putting together other people's stories. This is the idea now. Bring out another book, which is really about other people's stories, their experiences, and and also on top of that, we probably have half a dozen different entrepreneurs who come to us asking for advice, asking, Morris, what would you do with this? And we were talking about, was it information of things? No, Internet of Things.
Yeah.
Word of Internet of Things.
Yeah.
Right.
So all connectivity.
Yes, it's all connected. It's not that new, but not a lot of people know about Internet of Things. And we have this guy who has, he's got a device now which you put in shoes, and it gives you all the data. So,
oh yes, yeah.
Whether how your shoe's wearing, and whatever. But really, it's data collecting, and because that's what information of Internet of Things is. It's information. And so the tons of data come with this. So we're working with this guy. He's now working with one or two of the shoe companies to put this in the shoe, so that when people are running, walking, whatever, he's getting all this data is fed all the time.
Crazy.
It is crazy, but it can produce millions in terms of revenue.
Millions. Because it can also help people as well. Help people significantly in the process.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I think you have to have something that works. And if it actually works, then fine. Then the spin-off is the data.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Joe, I want to say a massive thank you. I really appreciate it, man. This was absolutely excellent, and I want to say a massive thank you. Hopefully you enjoyed it too, and you had a couple of different edges of questions.